Agreed.
Good morning. We have one more person, two more people we expect in person. So we will wait just a couple minutes. I appreciate you all being here. Just how to operate the system that you're at. There's a big red button in front of the microphone. In order to speak, to be heard, you do have to press the red button. There should be a light that turns on to tell you that it's on. As soon as you're done speaking, press the red button again. Otherwise, we'll get feedback, and we can't have too many open mics. So that's a bit of the protocol that we have for you today. We also normally would not be meeting with you sitting up on a dais. We'd probably have a more informal setting. However, with the protocols that we have for COVID, we're also broadcasting this virtual, have virtual participants, and then we also are putting it live on Facebook, etc. And there was a council meeting last night. There's going to be a planning and zoning commission tomorrow night, so they just asked us for this meeting not to rearrange everything, but just to have it up here. If it works well, we might just keep this format. Hopefully, as we progress in the study, the protocols get a little more relaxed and we can meet in a more informal setting. That would be our preference. Hopefully that's something that you would agree to as well. And at all possible, we try to get to the corridors that we are studying to physically be right next to it so that if we do have questions, we actually can go investigate right there at the time. Again, we're still waiting for a couple of people who said they would be here in person. Morning. Now we're down to one, and we will go through introductions. We do have quite a number of people virtually, and we also have a couple of dozen people who are live on Facebook right at the moment. So we appreciate your tolerance. There is. Do I remember it? No.
I'm working on it.
Okay. It all got switched not too long ago. Maybe if you ask Cheryl or John. And just to verify, Tim Burkhart, you're online? Tim Burkhart? Excuse me.
For those of you looking for the Grand Forks, the password to get into your internet and network, supposedly it's Grand Forks 1888. So I haven't tried it yet, though.
So that's how he's going to participate today then.
He's trying.
Okay. Tim Burkhart, are you on? We can see you, Tim, but I can't hear you.
Sir, Kwame said he is on, but he needs to be let in on Zoom.
Okay. He's not on the list because he can be the person.
Yeah, this is Tim Burkhart. I am connected and I can see and hear.
We hear you.
Thank you.
Did we hear Tim?
Acknowledging that he can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yes, Tim is here. Apologize for that.
Nope, thanks. We're virtually trying a newer format for us. So anyway, my name's Earl Haugen, Executive Director of the Grand Forks, East Grand Forks Metropolitan Planning Organization. I want to thank the ad hoc group for volunteering to serve on this study. We did go through a process where we asked pretty much each of the group that you're representing to forward a name. We didn't participate in trying to pre-select or identify people. That was all left to the area that you're representing to give us names. And I appreciate that you stepped forward to serve in that role. We have Alliant Engineering assisting us with this study. Tim Burkhart is a project manager. The bulk of the meeting will be run by him. But I believe the first thing we'll do is we'll go and introduce ourselves, identify what area that we're representing here. We do have people virtual. A lot of our partnering agency staff are virtually participating. We'll also go through their introduction so you're familiar with some of the names and the agencies that are involved. If Tim, if you could run through the roster and ask people, call their name out and ask them to introduce themselves, that would be awesome.
Yeah, glad to. Thanks, Bill. And yeah, I will do the roster of the ad hoc group, which is 11, and then we can go from there in terms of the agency representatives. And I may mispronounce your name. I apologize. So I've got an order here that begins with Kyle, and you can tell me how to say your last name with the council.
Yes, thank you, Jim. Kyle Kavami, Ward 5 of the Grand Forks City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Kavami, I got it. Brian Larson, East Grand Forks Council.
Yes, Brian Larson, East Grand Forks City Council at large member.
Thank you. I guess I don't need to repeat. You can tell me where you're from. Eric Hansen.
Yes, my name's Eric Hansen. I represent the neighborhood in the vicinity of Belmont and 32nd Avenue.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Tanya Kuntz.
Hi, yes, Tanya Kuntz. I represent actually the only house on Elks Drive.
Great. Thanks, Tanya. Andrew Budke.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Budke. I live, I guess, in the near South Side neighborhood near Belmont and 4th.
Thanks, Andrew. Chris Arnold.
Chris Arnold, Grand Forks Public Schools.
Hi, Chris. Thank you. John Zarko.
I represent Elks Drive, 32nd, and 47th on the East Minnesota side, East Grand Forks side for Reinhardt Township.
Got it. Thanks, John. And Dave Weisel?
I am the East Grand Forks representative for the Chamber of Commerce, sorry.
Yes. Excellent. Thanks, Dave. Zach Bob?
Zach Bolt, representing the Reinhardt neighborhood in East Grand Forks.
Thank you, both. I got it now. And Josh Brown?
Yep, Josh Brown, representing the Grand Forks side of the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. And number 11, no, not necessarily in that order, Craig Wald.
Craig Wald, representing the Bigland neighborhood in East Grand Forks.
Great, well, thank you. Before we move on, nice to virtually meet you. Look forward to doing this in person in the future. And really thank you all for your time. Obviously, you have other things you might want to do with the next hour and a half of your life, and it adds up to a lot of effort. So I certainly appreciate it. I know Earl does as well. So in terms of introductions, we do have a number of others on the line, as Earl mentioned. In terms of the consultant team, it's just me for today. As we get to future meetings, I'll have more of the team who are doing some of the technical presentations. So in terms of consultant team, it's just me. And then I guess, Earl, do you want to do others from the NPO to start?
We just have Peggy McNellis, which greeted people coming in. And Tim, just for your information, the way the system is set up for me, I can't see who's participating on the webinar. So if you could look at the participant list and name them off for introductions, that would work. Here in the audience, we do have a couple of Grand Forks staff people. Over there, Ryan Brooks on the laptop. He's the interim city planner, and Kim Greendahl with the Greenway Trail System. And so, Tim, if you could go through the agencies that are online, or everybody who's online.
Yeah, I will go through the online list. Try not to stumble on someone we've already done. I see Anna Pierce, and if you just want to say hello and indicate who you are representing.
Hi, I'm Anna Pierce. I'm with MINDOT Central Office, Metropolitan Planning Program Coordinator out of the Office of Transportation System Management. Myself and then John Mason are representing MINDOT.
Great, thanks, Anna. And I did see a note from John that he is not able to make the meeting today. Brad Bale.
Hi, I'm Brad Bale. I work with Woodside Smith Malting. We represent the City of East Grand Forks engineering side.
Thanks, Brad. Christian Danielson.
Hi, this is Christian Danielson. I'm with the City of Grand Forks Engineering Department.
Thank you. David Korenko.
David Kolenko, Assistant City Engineer for the City of Grand Forks.
Very good. Let's see, the names are jumping around on my list. Let me try this. David Murphy.
Yes, David Murphy. I'm the City Administrator for the City of East Grand Forks.
Good. Eric Hansen.
Yep, I introduced myself earlier.
Yep.
No
Thank you. Figured I would stumble on a minute or two here. Kristen Sperry.
Morning, Kristen Sperry. I'm the Planning and Environment Program Manager for Federal Highway out of the North Dakota Division Office.
Thank you, Kristen. Mark Demers.
Good morning, this is Mark Demers. I'm City Council member from East Grand Forks, at-large member, also a member of the MPO.
Thank you, Mark. Nancy Ellis.
Hi, I'm Nancy Ellis, Community Development Director for East Grand Forks and also the City Planner.
Very good. Rich Sanders.
I'm Richard Sanders. I'm the Polk County Engineer and also on the MPO TAC.
Thank you, Rich. And Terry Kuba. I'm not sure we did Terry yet.
I'm Terry Kuba. I'm with the
MPO.
And enjoying a day in the Grand Canyon, I see. That's excellent.
Badlands out in western North Dakota.
Just as good. Beautiful. And then Todd Phelan.
Morning, I'm Todd Phelan. I'm the city administrator for the city of Grand Forks.
Thank you. Okay, anybody I missed who is participating online? Excellent. All right. Well, I see Nick West.
Yeah, Nick West here. Good morning. Grand Forks County Highway Engineer.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Again, because of how this is set up, if people virtually want to make comments, if they would raise their hand, if you could kind of monitor that, that would be awesome. Yeah, I don't have that system over on my end. Do you guys have that ability at your end either? No. So Tim, you'll have to kind of shepherd us through comments. And if we're not seeing you, people virtually speak up and we'll get you noticed. Just a brief introduction, river crossings, additional river crossings has been something that both communities have been discussing for decades, and I won't rehash decades of history. I will only go back to 2018. In 2018, both Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, and the MPO adopted a transportation plan that identified 2 additional river crossings being built by 2045, if possible. One is at Merrifield location, if we're all familiar. That's about 3 miles south of 32nd Avenue. The second identified location is 32nd Avenue. Since that time, there has been a hydraulic study. I have provided the ad hoc group that link to the study document and also to a video that you could watch that was a presentation to a joint city council Grand Forks, East Grand Forks joint meeting in which it was discussed. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. Basically, the hydraulic study said that a bridge is possible to be built. It can be mitigated. That study also informed us that because of the mitigation issues, 47th is not a good site to build a bridge. And also in that study, it looked at a different alignment for 32nd Avenue. Again, that different alignment, known as a southern alignment, is not favorable due to mitigation issues. So out of that study, the 2 locations that still seemed really doable from hydraulic point of view are Elks and 32nd. We also looked at different heights that a bridge would be located. One possibly would just be low, meaning it would be more susceptible to flooding. We had a medium height that would be closer to, say, what the Sorley or Kennedy are, not precisely, but in that neighborhood. And then there was obviously the high and dry one. For the purpose of this study, we are looking at both Elks and the 32nd Avenue locations and a medium height bridge. And what we're focusing on is the traffic impacts that either of those 2 bridges would create to the neighborhood and to the communities on either side. And plus, we are also looking at, if we don't build one of these bridges, what we need to do to the existing system to accommodate the forecasted traffic volume. And with that, I'll let Tim step us through the meeting packet. And I believe both Tim and I would encourage that if you have questions, don't wait till the end. Chime in as you have the question in mind. With that, Tim, take away.
Yeah, thank you all. And
if I could real quick, this is Eric Hansen. I just had a real quick definition question, I guess, on one of the things that Earl said. He mentioned mitigation on a couple of different routes. I was just wondering what exactly was involved in what that means.
Sure, the mitigation is from a hydraulic point of view. Obviously, when you put a bridge across the flow of a river, it does tend to cause a rise in the flow of the water. Mitigation would be, in most of these examples, are digging out the natural ground as it exists today and allowing that storage of that water that's displaced to not cause a rise in the flood profile height. That's the case of mitigation in most of these. when we talk about the southern 32nd Avenue alignment and the 47th Avenue alignment, that mitigation, because the flood protection system on the Minnesota side doesn't extend that far south, that mitigation gets into accommodating farm residences, potentially buying out or building ring dikes. It enters into a whole different bureaucracy of permitting, et cetera. And so both cities and the APO decided that those weren't things to pursue when we had sites that are closer, that were much more accommodating to the mitigation issue.
Okay, thank you. That is exactly what I was looking for you to do. I appreciate that answer.
Okay, good discussion. So yeah, I will share my screen here and do a presentation. I do have two screens, so in theory I can see your hand up and monitor the chat, but if I get focused on something and miss it, feel free just to make some noise to make sure I see you. So let me hit the button and share the right screen. And just adjusting this so I can still see all of you. So if you can't see my screen, let me know. Otherwise, it looks like I'm sharing a PowerPoint. There we go. You'd think a year into it, we would all be perfect at this. So agenda, you can see this meeting is definitely a get to know you, get to know me, get to know the study, and for me to understand what's on your mind as we begin the technical work. Subsequent meetings will be much more substantive in terms of the river crossing and the traffic impact. So if you're impatient for that, I get it, but just as a preview today, I'm not presenting traffic information or river crossing options in any detail. So I'll do an overview of the study fairly quickly and certainly ask questions if I don't cover something that you're wondering about. Talk specifically a little bit more about how this group that we're calling the ad hoc group came to be and what my hope and Earl's hope and intent is with it. And then really do want to reserve some time for sort of an open discussion after we have those two topics about both the project and this group. A little bit about our public involvement plans, just to hear from you about, whatever is on your mind, hopes and dreams for river crossing, concerns about where we're headed, are we covering this or not covering that, et cetera. And so I think for me, that's important. And just advance notice, if I'm not hearing from you on the group in particular, I will seek you out and call on you. So appreciate your participation. Definitely be finished by 11 in respect of your time, for sure. We've done the introductions, so let's move into the overview. And Earl did cover this, and it may be familiar to you, but I'll just quick recap. Why this study, sort of the needs, the drivers. It's a little bit longer list than this, but sort of starting with traffic, as Earl mentioned, this is a traffic impact study number one, looking to address congestions both on the existing bridges, bridge approaches, and then certainly on the system in general. I think sort of traffic patterns, I don't need to tell you, sort of all orienting toward the existing bridges is something we're looking to use the word mitigate, not to confuse with the mitigating flood impacts, but to balance out the system. And certainly, both that's not on here, a couple are economic development, traffic, and traffic movement certainly relates to growth and development as an important outcome, I guess, of an additional river crossing. And to some extent, spreading the risk from flooding. As Earl described, a medium height bridge in this location is not envisioned to be wholly out of potential flood risk, but at a medium height, it certainly adds to the resiliency in the system. Why now? Earl did cover this in terms of past studies that have led us to both this study and to the two alignments under consideration. And glad to talk more about that. That would be an important point with both you as this committee and you sort of in your role representing what you're hearing from the groups or areas you represent, and also sort of bringing back to them the information that we discussed. You know, there are not infinite number of possibilities, but people will still be interested in a crossing that was considered previously or one that hasn't been considered. And part of the message here today, you know, for you, and we can sort of all get up to speed on this together if you're not, is why are we just focused on these two crossings? And it's important for us to keep that focus in this study and to, you know, honor and value the technical work that has gone before. Not to say if someone comes up with some brilliant new idea, yes, we should consider that. But if we kind of open everything back up, then we're probably just spinning our wheels on this study. So 32nd Avenue and Elks Drive appear to be the most promising based on the hydraulic issues as well as traffic, though traffic is really what we're looking at in this study. Endpoints, you know, you can add to this, but as I think about delivering this study and doing it well, you know, number one is having people engaged, people being general public, people being those of you on the committee, those of you representing the agencies as well. A technical study done in a vacuum on this topic is not going to be helpful. We need to have people engaged, both to, you know, it's two, when I say engaged, that's two-way. I want to know what you're thinking, I want to know what the public is thinking, and in turn I want them to understand what the technical staff are thinking, why we're focused on an issue, why we think something is or isn't a technical issue. Make sure we have really an exchange in that way. Traffic impacts, benefits, you know, number one from a technical perspective, what we'll spend the most effort on, what we'll get into the most detail on here. Understanding you add a new sort of big linkage in the transportation system, that would be a crossing of the river, that's going to change traffic patterns. It's obviously going to spread out, it's going to reduce traffic on the existing bridges, it's going to reduce traffic on some approaches to those bridges, it's going to increase traffic on streets right now that aren't connected directly to the bridge. So all that will be important for us to really understand in some detail. So we're not just sort of reacting from a gut level, but you know, what does it mean if 32nd Avenue has X number of more cars per day? And we have some tools to help really visualize that, because that's always a concern for any of us where we live, is traffic on our street in front of our house or business. And it's sort of my job to both understand to the best that we can what that is, what the technical answer is, but then also to communicate it, because sometimes things, if you don't get it, you're like, oh, it's fine, I didn't understand that, or the sky is falling and maybe it's not falling quite as bad as you think. So understanding both technically and communicating. Develop and evaluate alternatives, sort of obvious, but really what that means, we've got our two lines on our map right now. The sort of alternative to us is really sort of what are the tails on any of those crossings when you look at traffic. What else, if you do add one of those two linkages, what happens on the system? What else might need to be changed at, say, an intersection? Do we need an additional turn lane? If we have more traffic, does that require a design change to the system or doesn't it? So sort of fleshing out, we're not coming up from scratch what those two alignments are, but we are fleshing them out in terms of what does that mean? What do they really look like? Again, at a planning level, we are not producing engineered plans here, but we are doing everything we can to get enough information to move forward to understand how these two options work. And as Earl mentioned, what if you don't do anything, or what if nothing happens in the next 5 years? What does that look like on the system? What do you need to do to make sure the transportation system continues to function well in the absence of a new bridge? And that's part of the next steps is, you know, when we get to the end of this study, and without getting into too much detail, this is a planning study and it's being done under the process that's called planning and environmental linkages, which our agency staff understand well. And that is really looking at, we're doing a planning study. Anytime you do a new infrastructure project, there's some sort of environmental review that has to happen. and there's very specific rules and process to follow in that environmental review. So it's important in this planning study that we understand what those are, and really what that means is not getting ahead of ourselves. And the key thing, which we'll talk about probably every time we meet, but I will repeat, is we'll do this evaluation, we'll understand how these two options work, how they meet the goals of the project. One may be better, one may be worse. We'll document that. What we won't do is at the end of this study say, we have the answer, everything else we're throwing away, we're going to go build this one. If we do have an option that performs the best and that everybody likes, that's fine. But just so you know, we will carry forward a couple options as we go into the environmental process. So you don't maybe have to worry about that as much as I do to make sure that we do the process correctly so that we don't end up having to repeat this work when we're in a formal environmental review process as this river crossing proceeds. More do you need to know on that? The map you see just on the screen is one that we are starting with. We'll continue to add to that and use that both in these meetings and as we communicate with the public. This is probably more than you need to know in terms of our team, though I'm glad to go into some detail, but the point is this is a traffic study, but we do have other technical specialists involved on the consultant side. And I guess public engagements, I'm also leading that path. That's one of my skill sets and passions, and so you'll see me on the screen under that box. Our traffic staff, we also have environmental staff, as we're doing a high-level screening to understand what might be the impacts and issues associated with the different crossings and how that might make a difference into which one works better or which one meets the goals of the project better. And water resources and structures is we're not doing a detailed study on either of those items, but obviously thinking about crossing the river, bridges, and impacts on water resources, both important. And then the conceptual design, again, what that means that you'll see from us is not engineering drawings with every last detail identified, but it'll mean an understandable concept so we can see here's what this intersection might look like, here's what 32nd Avenue might look like, what changes are needed or not needed. So we will be developing those concepts and going over those as we go forward. I love diagrams like this when I have a whole pile of work and I'm trying to make sense of it and order it. You don't need to know all the detail, but this, like other planning studies, I think of in 3 phases, which you'll see called discovery, development, and documentation. Somewhat self-explanatory. Right now we're in discovery, which means we, the technical team, are gathering information and analyzing it. We're asking for you and the public upcoming in a couple months for your input. So making sure that we sort of get all the issues on the table, that people are asking questions and providing information from their perspective before we jump right in and say, we've got the answer. Development, developing alternatives, adding detail to the options that we already have. That's sort of the technical guts of the study, really. And at the end of that comes evaluating those options, as I already talked about, comparing them, which one works better, what sort of performance are we getting, what are the concerns, et cetera. And then that documentation is sort of those next steps, both producing a nice report that says what we did, that helps serve as sort of the communication piece going forward that says, hey, this communities did this study, whether it's helping identify funding or going into the environmental process. That documentation will be an important piece of what we produce. And this you can see in small print there, just in terms of the schedule. I guess I've got some more schedule detail, but the study will be finished by the end of the year, so that's fairly quick. We need to keep on schedule with the technical work and hit our milestones in terms of meetings of this group and then meetings of the public to get that input at each step and then move on to the next piece of the project. I'm just going to pause in case anyone has any questions but didn't want to interrupt me and ask them. Any questions? try to adjust my screen and make sure I'm seeing all the, not quite seeing all the Zoom features, so do just jump in if you happen to ask a question. I'm not seeing your hand raised. As I think you saw by email, we will and do now have a project website that looks like what's on the screen. It's really right now just has the introduction to the project. That's where we will add information such as the presentations and summaries of meetings for this group, and that is the place where we will focus the public for our engagement. We will have an interactive map up here when we do our first open house, which is a really nice tool for getting broad comments and even some back and forth among people who are interested, making their comments and others that can react to that. So the website address is at the, I think you have an email, and it'll flash up here at the end of the presentation. Okay, now I just discovered my features on the screen so I can see if you make comments. Details here again, try to hit the high level on engagement, which for me is both public, general public, and then agencies, which is a lot of you. And for the ad hoc groups, we've sort of mixed those two together very intentionally. You'll see the same phases identified here, and really the point I want to make is probably on the right-hand column, just that we have different, what I call tactics, different ways of engaging this group. Frankly, it is very important, and I've got a few slides coming up about sort of how I envision this group, but just to cut to the chase in terms of the combination, you know, any study like this, you've all been involved, participated, or observed. It's hard to get people engaged. You know, people are busy. Coming to a meeting, even going and taking a survey, it's not always easy. And one of the ideas with the composition of this ad hoc group is we have some natural sort of cross-pollination that can happen in our meetings with people who represent a neighborhood versus representing the city or elected officials. So it's not to shortcut the public process, but sort of to provide an extra layer, an extra opportunity to make sure that we on the consultant team are hearing things, make sure that you can help in sharing some of the technical information. Otherwise, in that right-hand column, you see, so meetings of this group, what right now it's called public input meeting, which is sort of usually we call that an open house, a more general name depending on what format we use to the extent that we're doing virtual versus in-person meetings. And then we do have sort of a to-be-defined set of activities that I'm calling pop-up engagement, where we can really apply some extra resources as needed, and that might be something like an in-person, you know, attending an existing event that's happening, or doing an on-site, just a walking tour of a few blocks with interested people to talk about the project generally, or to talk about an issue. So that's a tool that we have that is sort of intentionally not defined yet, but we can sort of be very quick in defining that and deploying some resources as needed to address a certain issue or to bring in a certain group. So, transitioning to talk specifically about this ad hoc group in a minute, if you saw this in advance, this pyramid structure, there's a lot going on here. There's 2 points, I think, generally to think about all the different entities that are involved in this project and what their role is. As a planning consultant, I try to be clear, especially with, you know, members of the public when we have an open house. We're asking for your input. Well, what are we going to do with that input? Same with this group. Are we asking you to make a decision, or are we asking you to provide input that then will be passed on and packaged and reflected on? So that's what you see in the right-hand column of this graphic. So at the bottom of the pyramid is the worker bees, which is me and the MPO staff, the consultant team, MPO staff. essentially doing the project, managing the project. General public is intentionally very broad bands in terms of numbers of people and representation, and the bullets in the middle really describe how we will involve people, which I've covered already. So that, members of the public, they provide input, and hopefully also hear information from us, but definitely provide input. Moving up, then we see all of you, the ad hoc group, and your role. We sort of inserted you in a way into what is sort of the typical MPO structure. Not that, I guess, different ways. The public, you could also put a bar up and down the side saying the public provides input at every level here, right? These are our public meetings and public input opportunities. But so this group, all of you, and I'll go into some slides in the next page, planning on 5 meetings at key points in the process. This is the first one. And you're certainly listening to, hearing, and representing input from the public. And if we go up the pyramid, then the MPO Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC, which, as you know, is a standing group, and some of you are on that, provides input up to the MPO board, who ultimately is our ultimate decision maker for the purposes of the study. And I don't want to get too hung up on decisions, because you're in a group, we have a meeting. In a way, you'll be making a decision if it's between this and this, or making a recommendation. But point being, there is sort of a chain of command, if you will, and ultimately it's not news, but in this case, the MPO board has the final say. On the next slide, I'll talk about, well, what do we mean about decisions? Like, what decisions are we even making? It's not a really long list when it comes down to it. So let me do that now. I may have said some of this already in terms of this group, and definitely appreciate your input and thoughts on this if it doesn't make sense or you don't think it's quite right. But there's different ways you can get input on a study like this from some sort of committee. Sometimes it's just a technical committee, it's agency staff. This one is a little bit different in that it's sort of, I would call, citizen representatives, other community representatives, and elected officials, with the agency staff providing input. As you know, a number of you are here today for that purpose. Agency staff have lots of information, lots of history on these studies. They know traffic and engineering and planning. And so the idea is for all those staff to be a resource to this core group, but ask all of you, the 11 of you on the group, to you're sort of the active members of the group. And so the way we set this up was, I might jump ahead to this next slide. A lot of information on here, but you see the word seats at the top. Each of you, the 11 of you, represent a seat, and that's an interest, a geography, perhaps an organization, but we tried to be even a little bit more broad than that. Stepping back, not thinking about people, not trying to necessarily provide so many number on one side and so many on the other, but like, what are the issues? What are the geographies? What are the types of concerns? And so the 11 seats is what we came up with at the staff level between my team and MPO staff, and Earl certainly got some input from others as we were putting this together. So probably not perfect, but I think it's nicely broadly representative, and you see, and as I guess you know yourselves or from the introductions, we're talking about neighborhoods, business representation, and we do have a school district representative sort of broadly for Grand Forks and East Grand Forks, given the number of schools and schools right on some of the routes. And then, if I didn't mention it, business and Chamber of Commerce. So come back to that, but in terms of the previous slides, what we're up to is balanced representation of stakeholder interests. That is the intent with this group. Second bullet is, again, the diversity on the group is somewhat intentional, assuming you're coming from different places, you have different perspectives. The groups you're representing have different perspectives, so hopefully, if that's the case, this group provides an opportunity to share those and to hear each other. And I don't want to be, I've been accused of being always the glass half full person, and not to be naive about it, but certainly better if we have open discussions, and if we have disagreements and we're coming from different places, that's okay. This group is the place to air those issues and, ultimately seek some sort of common ground and understanding if there's an issue and a lack of agreement on something. The third bullet under the top, again, it's a lot to ask of you, but really trying to have you on the group be a two-way conduit. So you're here, you have your personal perspectives, and whether that's sort of where you live or where you work or business that you run, really trying to ask you to set that aside and represent, especially if it's different, represent that broader group that you are assigned to. And again, both bring that information to the meeting and then take information back to that group. And obviously that's up to you as to whether that's formal, if your neighborhood and your neighborhood meets, that's an easy way to sort of provide an update and get input, or whatever it is, council members or others. But trying to get to that two-way role. And membership, I think we hit on that one, so let me advance the slide. This looks like the same slide, but it says members at the top where we just filled in the names. We know who you are at this point. But again, the point was we didn't start with the names, we started with the positions and then got to names to fill them. And again, thank you, all of you, for volunteering to do this.
Excuse me, Tim, if in the essence of time, could we move on to maybe the anticipated meeting dates, but more so get the group discussion going?
Yes, glad to. Let me do one more thing, Earl, first, but I don't want to get too bogged down on this. But when we talked about sort of decisions, I've identified 3 decision points or key things where we will make a decision in the study and then move on. And so these are the 3: purpose and need, the alternatives to be considered, and the study recommendations. To some extent, the first 2 have already been, they're already generally known as the purpose and need being why are we doing the project, why are we doing the study, what's the objective of the river crossing. But we will add some detail to that and then ask for sort of formal confirmation that that's where we're going. With the alternatives, as we talked about, the 2 corridors have been identified, but there's additional detail, which, where the devil will be, devil in the details of what those actually look like. So that's the second decision point. And then third one, again, is the recommendations going forward. So yes, anticipated meetings, as I mentioned, 5 of them. This is the first one. I've got some flexibility, as you will see, and I think we've asked each of you just to hold this time on your calendar monthly, but you see it really adds up to every other month, but I'm not quite ready to say which month. So if you'll bear with me, it gives us some flexibility to make sure when we do meet with you that we make the most use of your time, that we're ready with a presentation, or that we're sort of coming up to a public event where we want to get your input on sort of the materials or the messages that we will present. So I am anticipating the next meeting a month from now, where we will have some technical information to present on sort of the background, trying to understand the traffic patterns and other traffic details on the existing system. And the other thing you see in bold there is the public open houses, and tied to the meetings of this group, because my intent is that before we go to the public, that you all have a chance to provide some input or review materials and give our team some advice on what we're presenting or what we should be asking. Any questions at this point? Okay. So yes, the real thing I want to make sure that happens today before we move on to other meetings. You can see the questions on the screen. So we have a lot of questions and maybe they overlap, but I will just read them. So thinking about the seat you represent, again, sort of beyond maybe just what you're thinking personally, but anticipating or knowing what the broader group is that you represent. You know, what are the top issues this study should address? What are the biggest concerns, biggest opportunities? Depending on where you're coming from, you might see both, or you might see more of one versus the other, or your groups or constituents. And then what does success look like when we are finished? This is a study. As I've said before, we're in the middle of a marathon. This is a piece of it. We won't get to December of 2021 and have a new bridge built. But there is an important piece to advance the idea of the bridge. So I'm going to ask you to weigh in on those. For now, I won't. You don't necessarily have to answer all of them, but I may come back one by one and ask. So be glad to take volunteers, or if I don't have any, I'll just maybe just go back to my list and kind of go down the list and ask. So anyone dying to speak up? Maybe it's easier if I pick on people.
Well, Tim, this is Eric Hansen. I'll go ahead and volunteer to put my hand up first to get the discussion going. So, as you know, as I indicated earlier, I represent the 32nd Avenue neighborhood, and I guess my perspective and the perspective of my neighborhood is that, you know, government's first duty is kind of akin to medical. First, do no harm. And you know, for the 32nd Avenue area, I think we need to turn this into more than just an engineering discussion. You know, all that stuff is very important, but there are a lot of emotions that go into this as well. And I think that's something, and I really appreciate the ad hoc group being put together. And you know, in the past, I think there's a lot of feeling that there hasn't been a lot of public discussion on this. So I think this is a wonderful first step. Because, you know, I think the biggest point for my seat is that we are looking at fundamentally changing a neighborhood. And that is not something that should be considered lightly whatsoever. And, you know, there may be some emotion tied into that, and I will do my absolute best to be open-minded and you know, as objective as I can. But there is a level of subjectiveness in this entire discussion.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And maybe in a way, I appreciate that you went first, Eric. In that, yes, I mean, we can talk about the other corridor as well, but I don't have any quantification or any diagrams or drawings to show, but yes, you make a new connection from 32nd across the river that will change traffic patterns there. We can expect additional traffic on 32nd Avenue. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, and acknowledge that if, you know, there's whatever the preferred corridor is, I don't want to use the words winners and losers, but yes, there will be benefits and disbenefits in certain locations. And so that is a challenge. If I lived anywhere, you know, where I live right now, that's where I would be coming from as a resident. So part of our challenge is, I mean, yes, emotions are fine. That's human. That's where we're at. Can we zoom out and think about the full picture and why we're doing this and what the needs are and what the benefits are? That's my hope. And I have, you know, just to be clear, if it's not clear already, I am a planner. I follow process and decision process, and I'm absolutely a neutral party in this study, and that's really important to me as a professional. So I guess keep it coming. Eric, let's, make sure, with all of you, obviously, that we understand where people are coming from and sort of both anticipate the concerns and then also are able to respond to them. And again, if there's adverse impacts, which is my words somewhere, can we do anything to reduce those? Certainly, can we do our best to communicate and understand those? So at least when we're having the discussion, yes, there's emotion, but can we also make sure that we know, like, okay, this is sort of the factual side of it as well. So, Kyle, if you have a hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to, appreciate us bringing everything together and this committee together. And I think that as you think about what's important to me is looking at item number 4 and what does success look like. And for me, what are the goals? What are the goals of this process, and what are the goals of if there's another connection? What's the impact? I think that's all driven backwards. Let's find out what the best case scenario is or what the hope is, and then we can understand what the concerns and what the opportunities are. That's my concern. I'm all for more connectivity between the two communities. I think we are one big metropolitan, right? But just thinking about what do we hope to achieve, and then does it make sense as we go backwards and look at what are the concerns and what are the opportunities and weigh those out. Just to kind of say that's my concern, because I'm really focused on, let's just say this works and we have all the funds, what does it look like and what are we hoping to accomplish, and then we can kind of go backwards and understand that. That's probably where my mind is right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, putting the goals first, and obviously not everyone will have even the same goals in mind, but I think we can begin to articulate those and also ask for input on them. And I guess probably what I hear in your comments is this, it's balance. It's like, we're not doing, there's an interest in a bridge. The interest is coming from essentially an opportunity or trying to solve a problem. And so being clear about where that's coming from, I think is part of what I heard. Yeah. Let's see. Anyone else want to volunteer, or otherwise I'll just start down the list, which is just fine. Let's go to Brian Larson.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just kind of go through these 4 questions here to kind of keep me on topic.
Thank you.
Top issues this study should address. I'm really interested in reviewing the traffic studies, particularly watching or learning the traffic flow patterns for both options. In particular, the Elks Drive Bridge location, seeing how that traffic flows. Does it simply get onto Belmont and then back to 32nd Avenue South, creating a few extra turns and some inefficiency of movement there. So really understanding the data and using your engineering models to see how traffic flows from city to city, I think will be very interesting. My biggest concern, I think that it's pretty clear that either bridge location is going to impact a certain number of homeowners, and that's a real person-to-person impact there. And so there's going to have to be a lot of work done to understand the impacts of both of these alignments, understanding what we can do to help to mitigate some of the impacts to the homeowners and the neighborhoods and the communities on either side of the bridge, to make sure that when we're all done here, that we have a successful project that doesn't have more negatives than positives. I think our biggest opportunities as well is our ability, certainly for both communities to work together and find common ground to find solutions to mitigate some of the impacts of the bridge landing locations on either side of the river. And what success looks like when we're done is we have a new bridge. We have a neighborhood bridge on the south end of both of our communities, and that's a major success, decades in the works, and we should all be really proud of it.
Thank you, Councilmember. I appreciate that. And you provided a really nice model, and I think I'm going to ask others, if you would, to also just try to step through the questions to the extent you have a different answer for one versus the other. I really appreciate that. So move on to Tanya. Tanya Kuntz, are you there?
Yeah, Brian very well said, and certainly understand where Eric Hansen is coming from. Also all for connectivity, improving both communities certainly. And then, yeah, I think we've itemized the top issues, the concerns Eric brought to light very well. There's schools, you know, Viking schools right on 24th, which if the bridge came over on Elks Drive, that's a bottleneck right into Belmont, so you'd either have to turn north or south. So I think, you know, that our neighborhood, much like Eric's, is just kind of wondering, Brian asked the question really well, what does that look like? Is that a roundabout? Do you take kind of the tennis courts and basketball court right on that corner there? You know, the homeowners, I think, where that bottleneck would be, you know, it's tough to get on that road, honestly, the way it is. In morning traffic hour and that sort of thing. My kids do walk home from school, so they're crossing. It was nice they put in that little stoplight, so that backs up traffic 4 or 5 cars deep. My kindergartner sometimes stops to pick up a rock, you know, when he's crossing the road. And there's lots of kids that, you know, come down that street with their golf clubs on their backs, riding their bikes, playing tennis, that sort of thing. So absolutely all for connectivity, all for improving our communities. I think, you know, what Tim said, the devil's in the details, and not to jump ahead of it, but just I think ambiguous gets a little scary for a lot of people. I think if you could, you know, this is the first step, certainly in detail, sort of give us a map of what that might look like, and then I don't see a way that, you know, either neighborhood would be impacted. Certainly, you think about homeowners, most of the time that is their largest asset. So right away, you know, there's sort of a question of a devalue of that home that you've worked hard to buy and build and raise your family in. So certainly connectivity is important, and we need to move our cities ahead. But as Brian so much more eloquently than I, you know, how do we onboard this without kind of devastating certain people in certain pockets of areas? So good discussion so far. Thank you. Wasn't prepared to talk, but.
You did it well. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's just continue on the East Side neighborhoods, or East Grand Forks neighborhood. Andrew Budke.
Yeah, so I live on the Grand Forks side, just to be clear.
Yeah, so I put too many words in there. I mean,
okay.
Looking at yes. Thank you. Grand Forks side neighborhoods.
I think as far as issues to address, you know, I think the last time that I was sort of engaged with this process was probably like 2019, Earl, right, when there was like joint meetings in this room. You know, one thing that people were very eager to comment about, wanted to be heard on, was you know, impacts to school children in particular, and I was a little disheartened that nobody seemed to be thinking of the school children at the Belmont School, right, Phoenix Elementary. So I just hope that when we're talking about traffic, which has been mentioned, that the do nothing option does mean something, right? I'm not sure what that is exactly, but I guess it's worth pointing out that this neighborhood, the near south side, has, for the last couple of years, kind of gone through a parallel process of traffic study and mitigation, right? There's been, the Reeves and Belmont corridor have been looked at on their own, right? For the amount of traffic and in particular the speed that motorists use those corridors at. So I just want to make sure that if people are invoking safety and the volume of traffic on any particular corridor, that we don't lose sight of all of the corridors that we're talking about here. Kind of shifting gears, another one here is the biggest opportunities. I think I would like to point out that a couple of years ago we had a situation where there was road construction in the summer. I think the Point Bridge was perhaps being painted. I think we had like 2 bridges. Yeah, we had 2 bridges down at a time, which caused a lot of disruption. I'm sure it did. So I think that there's as was mentioned, I think there's a huge value for the entire community in basically having a more diffuse network of bridges, right, to connect the 2 sides of the river. So I think that's what success would look like. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. And I guess to clarify, in terms of there, lots of details, but we will the traffic information we present using this great tool that some of you know about, which is Streetlight, which really is a big data set that uses essentially cell phone information that you don't know is being collected probably, but it provides an amazing way just to see existing patterns and then to understand the changes that we might see. So not just on these corridors is my point. We will look at a much broader area that we'll be considering. Okay, Chris Arnold with the school district.
Yeah, hi, this is Chris Arnold. I guess the top issues, and I think it's been hit on just about every person that's spoke so far. Really, we need to make sure that the study addresses how we're going to mitigate impacts to any of those schools, including Holy Family. I know that I've been in talks with Katie on that as well, but any kind of change in traffic is obviously going to impact those students. And my other concern, right along with Brian, is not only to take a look at that flow of traffic, but what kind of traffic are we going to see? Are we going to permit heavy truck traffic through this corridor now, or is this going to remain a passenger type traffic? Because if we are, that changes things significantly. There is ample opportunity as a part of this study to increase pedestrian safety at those 3 South End campuses, which would be Kelly, Schrader, and Viking. And that can simply be through engineering measures such as flashing guards or some other type of intersection crossing. I don't know how many families or people are at Kelly or Schrader, but we currently have a major issue with students crossing at not marked areas, which would be the middle of the block, not only on 32nd Avenue, but also onto Cherry. And I think that kind of wraps up the biggest concerns. Biggest opportunity, I agree with Mr. Budke over there, that we could improve conditions at Phoenix, which would be a big win for the school district to help those students get out of there. That's a very congested corridor already, and it's only going to get worse at Phoenix. Phoenix is a school that the district intends to continue to invest dollars into. We expect that campus will grow and change with the community. And I think that success really does look not only at improving conditions at Phoenix, but also improving conditions at the 3 other campuses, including Holy Family in regards to ped safety as they navigate home from school or to school.
Good. Chris, thank you. Appreciate that. John Devil, and I have you as representing Reinhardt Township. Is that correct, John?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think no matter where a bridge goes, they should look at 32nd for not having access to the schools off of 32nd. I think they could look at a design off of Cherry. They have a lot of space to use there, and it would be safe now even, I think, with the traffic that's going there. It's very dangerous for kids. And on the Minnesota side, we're looking for 2 bridges. I think Merrifield's a slam dunk. I think we're all agreeing on that. The other one is the one that we have to look for leadership on what is best for the community. I think it's going to impact anyone and everyone. I am on 32nd on the east side, but if that is where they choose to put the bridge for traffic, I would agree with it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And Dave Bevel, Grand Forks Side Chamber of Commerce.
East Grand Forks side, but
Apologize.
it's all right. Yeah, so
Go ahead, East Grand.
as a Chamber of Commerce, it's a little less emotional because of the neighborhood aspect. You know, we're looking at it more from a business perspective and connecting customers and businesses together. So, you know, opportunity or concerns would be that nothing gets done. And since the pandemic, we've noticed different changes in how the customers are accessing the stores, and people are opting more to have things delivered to their front doors than they are driving across town to pick things up. And I think Amazon has picked up on this, and they've built a store or a new warehouse in the Fargo area. So expecting same-day delivery to show up very soon. That will have effects in our community in the business sector. So opportunities would be for us to connect our customers and the businesses and getting those, you know, like I was saying before, you would cross the river to go to work and you would do your shopping on the Grand Forks side of things and then come home. Well, now people are working from home and there's less opportunity for them to do that and less motivation as well to shop locally. So we'd like to, those opportunities would be connect our customers again. And success would be to build not only 1, but 2 bridges for this great communities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Let's move on to Zach Boat with Reinhardt Neighborhood.
Yeah, I guess a lot of my concerns have been brought up by numerous members here. One thing I want to point out too is I know there's a lot of growth in the community, a lot of movement on the school side, looking at different opportunities. We got to look at focusing on the future, I think, is one thing we got to point out too. What's happening today with traffic flows and drop-off areas is probably not going to be what's going to be there in 5, 10 years when this actually takes place. So it's try to encourage the community in these areas to focus on that, and if we can provide concepts or visual aspects of what potential improvements might be made in those areas, I think that'll help in whatever neighborhood we decide to move forward with. It's hard to move off what's happening today and the troubles we're having today. So I think if we as a group can help lead in our communities, I think that'll help push that forward. And also just not just to focus on where the bridge is going, but how we get to our major transportation corridors. How does this traffic get from that bridge on the Grand Forks side to Washington Street? How does it also get to and connect in the East Grand Forks side, and where those major corridors for traffic flows as well too will be the concerns that I'll get asked in my neighborhood. Traffic coming up Reinhardt Drive, and how those areas will be affected as well. So just to have some visual aids and some information would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thanks, Zach. A couple more here. We've got about 15 minutes of our meeting time. Josh Brown, Chamber, and see if I can get this right, Grand Forks side.
Yeah, apparently the document's wrong. I didn't even catch that, so.
Okay, that's where I got my information. That's probably my mistake too.
Yeah, so I guess looking at these 4 areas, I think the top issues to address is, and it's been mentioned a couple times, is just, in my opinion, which locations a bridge should go. So including that Merrifield, I know that's not specific necessarily to this group, but obviously it's got a major impact on what that traffic looks like in town.
So, how do we get that farm traffic moving across the river as well in a different area? And then to me, from a high level standpoint, the biggest concern and the biggest opportunity, I believe are actually the same thing. What those impacts are of the chosen location or locations, because there's the positive side and then the potential concern side of what those impacts are. So I think it's really answering that same question on both sides of that coin, so to speak. And then to me, success looks like us moving this down the road to get the bridges or bridge built. Like I think it's been mentioned a few different times, and even in the introduction, that this conversation's been going on for a while. How do we get it to the point of we're not talking about it anymore, we're actually doing something about it, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Okay, and Craig Wald, Bigland neighborhood.
Yeah, I guess I'm representing the Bigland neighborhood in East Grand Forks. I'd say the issues and concerns are kind of one and the same. Big thing for me is, the traffic types that be using this bridge, be trucks or passenger vehicles, how that breakdown of traffic will go through the corridor, and what the goals or what we can do to mitigate any of that traffic causing safety concerns for the corridors, if that means changing alignments of roads or doing different drop-off areas around schools. And I feel like, there's a lot of opportunities on all these corridors to mitigate those issues, but I just want to make sure that they're all looked at. And biggest opportunities, I think that, kind of echoing off of what everyone else has said, this just gives us a great opportunity to connect both Grand Forks and East Grand Forks, and gives us a more, a good view of how we can get traffic to the south end of East Grand Forks and Grand Forks more efficiently and keep our businesses running. And I just think that, again, success, what that looks like for me is a bridge on the south end for more local traffic, and also a bridge further south for that more heavy truck traffic. And I think that also, I guess that sums it up.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Craig. So just a time check on our meeting. I'm committed to finishing here at 11. I don't have anything more to present. I know there are a lot of others of you online. So I would be glad to turn to other questions or comments, but first I might ask Earl if you had anything else on your mind before I do that. I don't know if you're near a microphone.
Yes, thanks. It has been asked, I think, and brought up, what type of traffic, if you would witness the traffic on the Point Bridge, that is the type of traffic that we're planning for on this bridge that we're studying in this study. The Merrifield, that's the purpose of the Merrifield Bridge, is for that other truck traffic that people express concern. So as you discuss the bridge traffic that we're looking for, refer to people as to what they experience on the Point Bridge for traffic. And it would be that same point of view, that same type of traffic that we would be studying on this structure.
Do we know the volumes of that traffic?
Yes. We know the volumes. We also know the composition of that traffic. We know the direction of the traffic flow. You'll get all that information.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, with that, I would open it up to anyone else in the, got some extra slides here. Anyone else participating today that has questions or comments?
This is Dan Korenko. I know I was at the special TAC meeting a couple weeks back, and I brought up public input meetings, making sure that we got as much public input as possible on this project, because we don't want somebody at the end of the day coming in saying they didn't have a chance to have their say on this concept. And I believe that you indicated, Tim, that there wasn't any, that direct mailings were not included in the proposal, and I think Earl was going to look into if there was available funding in the MPO's budget for some kind of direct mailing. Do we have any follow-up on that, or general idea as to how else are we going to try to drum up and get as much public input as possible?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Good question, and I know we talked about that at the last meeting, and I will admit Earl and I have not reconnected on that. So we definitely need to do that. Earl, do you have anything more to offer on that now, or should we just discuss after the meeting?
The direct mailing option would be for the 3 open house that we have labeled, instead of for the 5 meetings of this group. And so
Correct.
That's something that we're still investigating. We obviously have thousands of properties, so the direct mailing, we have to come up with an economic way of distributing that. One of the things we hope is all of you are probably social media and networks, and that would be the optimum way to get the personal touch and communication out. So we have not made a decision one way or the other on the direct mailing. It's still something that we're looking into, and would focus them just on the 3 major public events that are scheduled for this study.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions or comments before we close? I know we mentioned the website, and please know, starting right now, there is a spot, I don't know if I'm sharing my screen or not. Yes, I am. If you go to the website to sign up to be essentially on the mailing list, but then we can use going forward. Again, that doesn't get to everything in your question, David, but beginning to build that list and try to capture people who are online starting right now. Okay, well, I stopped sharing my screen. I think I'm ready to close for today. And again, I just want to repeat from my perspective, really appreciate the commitment both today, the other meetings, and then what happens in between the meetings. And I really appreciate that discussion. Obviously, this is an easy meeting. We can just talk and raise issues. Subsequent meetings, we have to address them and sort of get into some of the details, which we're ready to do and looking forward to. But I think this group did a good job, certainly from my understanding, of raising some of the key challenges for sure. This is a traffic study. That's not an accident. That's both where the benefits will accrue, sort of in one sense, and where people will see changes and need to understand what those are, and for us together to come to a solution and do everything we can to get to try to get to a solution that sort of addresses the needs and then balances out the impact. So certainly more to come on that, and lots of details, and again, appreciate your time. So I guess I will leave it there and turn it back to Earl.
Thanks. We do have a question for the group. Was it just fate that the first Tuesday of the month at 9:30 was available for all of you? We have a scheduled meeting maybe in May, and with most government meetings, they are on a set schedule, the first Tuesday, the second Wednesday, etc. Just wondering if the first Tuesday of the month in the morning is an available time for the group. We can kind of fashion our meetings from. If you want to send us an email back, I see a lot of nodding of the heads that it is likely. That's great. That's a lot less doodle polling and other trying to schedule meetings. So, but if you'd let us know in the email quickly, then we can proceed from there. Appreciate that.
That's good.
And hopefully we had a lot of participation on the Facebook Live. And I would encourage you, again, as you're contacted, being the rep, to direct people back to the city's Facebook pages. They can see these videos for quite a long time after today and later today. And that's the intent. At each of these meetings, it will be live broadcast at the same time as the meeting occurs. We don't have too many people in the audience. We may have stressed limited availability too much, perhaps. But there is, again, availability for people in person. We still do have the COVID protocols that we'll have to go through. And so you're not just automatically let in, you do have to pass a little screening that takes place. But again, we really appreciate your volunteering and hope that by the end of the year, we are still smiling and agreeing to move forward with something in this regard between both communities.
Question, just out of curiosity, who has the COVID shots or not? Maybe we all have them. Just a question.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
COVID, if they have their shots or not. And I know a lot of us do. I'm just curious if for meetings.
That's a personal choice. That's not something that we're allowed to ask. So I think with that, unless there's anything remaining, Tim, we can stand adjourned.
Nope.
And it sounds like we can kind of fashion around the first Tuesday of May.
Right, appreciate that. Look forward to seeing you all next month. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Earl.
All right, yeah. Take care, everyone.